Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, our special guest today, President Pro Tem Senator Dale Marsh. Also, Speaker of the House, Mack McCutcheon. The 2018 legislative session is ready for liftoff. Poof off, pop off. Anyway, we got the right stuff. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt. Our first of two guests today is President Pro Tem of the Senate, Dale Marsh.
Hello, Bill.
Nice to have you.
Glad to be here.
Another year, we're going into an election season, so I think everyone's hoping for a quiet session. But what are some of the bigger issues you feel must be handled before we leave this session?
Well, we do want a quiet, smooth session, but we've got to get the work of the people done. Top of that list is always the budgets. We're in a great position this year because for the first time in a long time I can remember, revenue is good in both the Education Trust Fund and the General Fund. And when you have revenue, it's a lot easier to draft budgets. So I'm optimistic there. You get past that, we have the issue with the prisons. You got a federal judge ruling that mental health in the prisons we have to address. I think we can address a lot of that in the budget process, making money available. You get past that, the broadband initiative, trying to bring broadband to rural parts of the state. You know, those tax credits. We've got a bill that gives a small tax credit to the working class people of the state of Alabama to follow behind Donald Trump's tax package. So those are some things we're looking at. The House has, I think, a list of about 6 agenda items. We talked to the Speaker. We're going to work on helping him get those through. We've got a very short list in the Senate, about 4 bills of priority. Get those through. It's more about quality instead of quantity, right. And that's what we're going to do and have a successful session.
When you say we have a budget surplus, I mean, some of that is due to the fact the economy is growing. Is that correct? And then the other part is y'all saved and prepared.
There's two things. One, I think we've been very fiscally responsible over the years when we didn't quite have the money we wanted and we still didn't get, we had the urge perhaps to do some borrowing we didn't do. The other side is we've passed policy. If you look at the policies we've encouraged and support, have been very pro-business policies. We always said if we create a good, strong business atmosphere in the state, the jobs will follow. That's happening. And because of that today, we've got ample revenue to get through a budget cycle, and hopefully it's going to continue going forward.
I know that right now, we're facing some other issues that probably are best addressed after the next election. And one of those, we recently did a poll of influentials. That was some 70 people that are in government or have wisdom beyond folks like me. And they listed infrastructure, gathering more industry to the state, and also workforce development. Are there any things in this session that will kind of tee up more workforce development, more encouraging for businesses and that type of thing?
Yeah, two things are going on in the Pro Tem's office right now. It's been going on for over a year. One is a comprehensive education plan for the state of Alabama. We've never had a comprehensive plan looking at all entities of education. I think I've talked to you about that on your show before. That's been going along very smoothly. Our hope is to have that entire study finished, signed off by the education community, and ready perhaps for legislation in 2019. The other, we're doing the same thing on infrastructure. The speaker will talk to this. He's been very involved in an infrastructure plan for the state. You know, we've got to have adequate infrastructure for the economic drive we're pushing for the state as well. That includes not just roads and bridges. You got to look at IT. You got to look at the ports, the docks, state docks. All those things have to be considered. Electric vehicles, how are they going to impact our economy?
Right.
So those things are being looked at now to be in preparation in 2019.
And I think, and from our perspective, I was talking to some of the folks in the Senate and the House over the last week, and they said that they all want to plan ahead for the future and not just live year to year. And I think, don't you think that's leadership? You could take some responsibility for that?
I hope we can. I think the speaker and myself, we're moving in that direction. You know, right now, Alabama, we're doing a study on the budgets. It's been going on for a couple of years. I think we've got to change the conversation. The truth is this. If you look at the GDP of the state, what we spend in government in the state of Alabama is extremely low. I mean, we have been very efficient in our government. We've downsized it. We're doing the right things. We don't have a bloated government. On the other side, our tax base to our citizens. If you look at Alabama compared to all other states, our tax burden on our citizens is at the lowest. It's the lowest. It's at a 40-year low in the state of Alabama.
Right.
So here's the questions we've got to start asking ourselves. We believe in low taxes. We want to keep that under. We want to be low in taxes. But at the same time, is it best to be the lowest in taxes and not have adequate infrastructure, not adequate education? I think you got to find that balance. We've got to put the state of Alabama in a position to offer those high-paying jobs. To do that, our people have to have vocational training and education to take them and to attract those industries in here. So we've got to look at those things, that fine-tuning going forward to make sure we have the right things in place that make us competitive as a state.
Don't you think that some of that is educating the public? You know, because we hear, yes, government is a necessary evil, but it's not always evil. But it's communicating to the people the needs and the harsh realities, and also the promise. But I think sometimes we lose that message on.
Bill, we have to speak up, and we've got the facts. I mean, we've done a study. We can show the numbers. The truth is, we have our government under control. It is not too big. Yeah, there's some waste in government. Let me tell you, I'm from the private sector. I've run decent-sized companies. Any company, anybody is going to have a degree of waste. You don't like it, but it exists. You have to say it's going to happen. Government's no different. Yeah, you're going to have a little bit of waste there, but the main thing is people keep it under control, keep driving it to be efficient, which we do. But we've got to change that conversation. We say, folks, we're doing our job. Now we got to look at what's best for the state going forward. We've got to make sure our education is up to par. We've got to make sure our infrastructure is up to par.
So this is an election year. We're going to see some turnover in the Senate. How do you feel about that?
We could have as many as 10 new faces there. What I feel is I'm out meeting these candidates. It's important that these candidates are kind of, in my opinion, middle of the road, try to do what's best for the state of Alabama, move us in a positive economic direction, and I'm going to make sure that happens so they do the work for the people of Alabama.
Well, I hope we can help Alabama succeed. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you.
You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Our guest has been Senate President Pro Tem Dale Marsh. Coming up next, Speaker Mack McCutcheon, and then we're going to get these guys together and see what they're talking about.
Improving our education system here in Alabama has always been a challenge, but it's one worth tackling. Providing our students the opportunity and resources they need to become future leaders is one of the most important tasks ahead in Montgomery in the coming years. That's why I was proud to work with my colleagues in the governor's office to pass an ambitious but responsible state budget that helps our kids put their best foot forward. And we invested an extra $13 million in the Alabama Pre-K program, the best in the country. I'm State Senator Tom Watling. We've got a lot of work ahead of us right here at home, and that's why I'm running for re-election.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Today we have with us the Speaker of the House, Mack McCutcheon. Mr. Speaker.
Bill, it's good to see you. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
Good to be back with you.
I always like it when we get to sit in the people's house, and that just gives a great feeling, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to do that again now, especially now that we're back in session.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do. We look forward to it. I know there's a lot going on. You have been a long-term planner. We are fiscally in as good a shape as we've been in decades. And I'm going to give you some credit on that. You told us last year you weren't going to spend every dime we had, and now we've got a surplus. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think it's a combination of several things. Our economy's better, unemployment's down, we got more people working. Revenues are up, which that's a plus for us. The fact that we have made some tough budget cuts over the last several years, I think that has helped cut down on some of our expenditures in the state. And the other thing is that we have been more responsible, such as the carryover, the $93 million carryover that we had. All of these things combined, have worked together to put us in a position to where we're looking at very optimistic budget.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past is, again, planning for the future. This, we hope, I know everybody does, is going to be a quiet session, but what are the couple of big items that you see that we need to get done?
Well, there's no doubt, if you put the budgets in the conversation, that becomes the number one item that we've got to address. But within those budgets, we've got the issue of the corrections. This is a problem that we're just now having to work on based upon the court and its ruling. So we've got to address that, and we've got to settle that issue. We've got to come up with a plan from the state, not the federal courts, to present to the federal courts, and hopefully they'll accept that plan and show in good faith that we're working towards fixing the problem. And this is going to take some money. It
is, but fortunately, it looks like the money is mostly there.
Yes.
There, we heard at the State of the State, Governor Kay Ivey said that she was looking at giving educators a pay raise and also giving state employees a pay raise. Do you think that's going to be possible?
Yes, I do. I think it's within the scope of what we see with the numbers in our budgets. Now, there is a huge question mark there, though, and that's the CHIPS program.
Right.
You're looking at could be as high as a $60 million ask there to try to supplement that program if the federal government doesn't continue what they're doing now. We cannot address the budget without having some kind of assurance that it's going to be either taken care of or we're going to have to allocate some funding for. And that $60 million is a lot of money coming out of that general fund budget, which we need to keep in mind. So we'll have to work through the process and see.
Sure, and for our viewers, that's the Children's Health Insurance Program for moderate to low income children, just for the children's health insurance.
That's exactly right. This takes care of those children that the families do not have adequate insurance, and it's based upon children's medical care. And we're committed in the state to make sure that we take care of our children.
But that was the next question going to be. Even if the federal government doesn't fund it, they've temporarily funded it through March, but if they don't fund it, then you believe the state will stand up and do the right thing.
Yes. That's an obligation that we're going to take care of.
You know, there seems to be more unity now than we've seen in the past. There is going to be some turnover in the House. How do you feel about the turnover, and have you been out there talking with candidates you think will be good candidates coming in?
Yes, we originally, as a matter of fact, just up to a few weeks ago, we were expecting somewhere around 17 to 18 open seats out of 105. We could go as high as 20. That some of the numbers that we looked at yesterday, we've got a couple that announced that they were not going to run that we didn't anticipate. But at the end of the day, whether it's 18 or 20, whatever that number is, we're out there working. We're looking at candidates that are interested in running for those open seats, and we're talking to them and trying to help them understand that the legislative process at times is very difficult, but we need people to come and run for the office that have open minds. It's so important for us. You know, a no vote, Bill, is an easy vote. You can vote no, and then you can go back home to your district and get on the political stump and gripe about everything that's wrong. And I think there was a time to where in politics that it was a war, and that it was a political war, and people maybe resonated to that message. But I think we're past that now, because the leadership in the Senate and the House is moving towards trying to address problems and fix problems for Alabama. So we need people, they don't have to agree with the issue, but don't just turn their back and walk out of the room. We're looking for people that will come to the table and sit down with us and find a solution to the problem. And so we're encouraging all of the candidates that are interested in running for these open seats in the House, we're encouraging them to have that kind of an attitude.
Well, it's easy to sit back and throw stones. It's hard to get in there and build a bridge or
I mean, that's where the work comes in, yeah.
I know you've been working on budget reform. We've only got a little bit of time left, and maybe we can pick that up with Senator Marsh, but how's that going, the budget reform program?
It's going great. As a matter of fact, we reviewed the preliminary report. You know, they had one report that came out during the last session. They're finishing up the report now, and they'll be voting on that report here in just a few days, and then that report will become public. Reviewed the preliminary report that they have of the final report, and I'm so encouraged with the information. It's not necessarily about legislation as much as it is about information. And this committee has come up with solid figures of our agencies, the expenditures of those agencies, the revenues that we're collecting and how we're spending those revenues. And I am really excited, looking forward to 2019, of addressing our budgets in a way that we've never done before in the legislative.
Good. Well, I know one of the pieces there is you're going to have to communicate it to the people so that they understand what you're doing.
Well, education is so important, and we've really started this education process, and it began through educating the legislative members.
Right.
And then from that, we moved to the public, and this report will be made public. I've been speaking about it all summer, traveling around the state, and when I talk to taxpayers and I tell them we are trying to make sure that every dollar that you send to us, that we get the maximum amount of benefit out of your money when it comes to the state. And people are really responding to that.
Well, we look forward to seeing it, reporting on it.
I do too. I do too.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Our guest has been Speaker Mack McCutcheon. We'll be right back with Speaker McCutcheon and President Marsh and talk about what they see coming in the future. You're watching The V. We'll be right back.
The Energy Institute of Alabama promotes reliable, affordable, and clean energy to help grow our economy, create high-paying jobs, and build public support for Alabama's energy industry. Access to clean, affordable energy continues to be an issue of vital importance in the halls of government and around the kitchen tables across our nation. The Energy Institute of Alabama is the best source of energy industry information and how it affects households across the state, from convenient energy production to alternative fuels to solar power and beyond.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Really special for us to have both of you on. Thank you for joining us. I know our audience is going to be thrilled to hear what you've got to say. We really do appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
One of the things that I wanted to start off with is, you know, you guys have known each other for a number of years. I don't know how long, probably at least 7 or 8, I would guess. How is it working together?
Well, it's working great, and I'll speak to that first. Of course, Senator Marsh and his leadership in the Senate, he and I really began to work together when I was serving as Rules Chairman, more so than on other times that we've worked together. But when I became Rules Chairman, our interaction became more frequent. And because of that, when I became Speaker of the House, I really looked at him as a mentor in a leadership role in the Senate. And of course, once becoming Speaker, then we really began to work very closely together. So I have the utmost respect for him, and like I say, he's just been a mentor for me.
How's it been for you?
I mean, obviously, if it was just up for me and Mack getting along, it'd be no problem at all. Our real challenge is that we have several members. His job is even bigger, 104 members in his body to deal with. I've got 34 in mine, and trying to get agreement and move in the right direction and with as less controversy as possible is what our job is. And it's not easy, but he and I have a great relationship. We understand that it's our job to move policy for the state, for the people of this state, do the right things, and we have to deal with the personalities involved to get that done. But I think we do a pretty good job of it and respect each other's abilities and their challenges.
Right. Well, and they are similar, but they're different. I mean, in the Senate, you've got fewer people, but they have, I would say, some more power to throw a monkey wrench into things. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if I'd say they have stronger personalities, but they may have a bit.
Maybe not strong.
Not so, but there's a lot of strong egos there.
Right.
And let me tell you, in fairness, every senator, every House member, they all have the same thing. That's a vote.
Yeah.
And when you have this, so they all have the same amount of power, and so we respect that and acknowledge that and deal with it.
Do you think that, Speaker McCutcheon, to you, you know, we've come through, you know, starting in 2010, the elections. We've seen the government of Alabama flipped over to be Republican, primarily conservative. How would you assess the grade on the work that has gone on for the last 7 years?
I would say that when you look at the work and the legislation that we have passed, we have did some very significant things and some positive things for Alabama. We've addressed the economy. We have looked at our budgets. We have tried to look at revenues from the standpoint of being accountable to the taxpayer for our revenues. And when you really look at those things, we've made some significant strides in that area.
We were talking about, Senator Marsh and I were talking about earlier about your budget reforms, but we were also talking about infrastructure, and he was saying about the need for infrastructure. Can y'all further that discussion a little bit for us?
Well, I'll start first. 2 years ago, I took the bull by the horns, if you will, and made the infrastructure an issue. And it was really based on the results that we saw from the A-Trip, which was the rehabilitation program to where we borrowed money to put into the state to work on our bridges and our road transportation projects. The results of that was very significant. Energizing the economy, helping local communities, opening up some roads and bridges, and so looking at that, I began to look at the revenue, and I said, here we are, we're making an economic impact on the state through A-Trip, but yet we're borrowing money to do it. So that led me into looking at the revenues coming in and asking the question, are we really supporting our infrastructure roads and bridges program? Of course, then from there we got into the rail transportation and the IT services and broadband, and all of these issues started to come out. Well, when I introduced what they called the gas tax bill at that time, 2 years ago, it didn't have a lot of steam, and it was really taken as a negative move. And people called me a tax hound, and all I'm trying to do is raise taxes on the people. But it was through that initiative that we really started to educate the legislative body as well as the public about the issues and the impact of having a good infrastructure program in place for the state. And of course, this past year, through Senator Marsh's work, which is ongoing right now, they're working with committees. We're joining in with that work with them to educate and move forward all of the issues that surround infrastructure in our state. And of course, we had a bill on the floor last year, and we were close, but at the end of the day, the timing was just not right. And so we pulled the bill off the floor, and as we go into this session, this is an election year, but I feel like we have moved the needle. I think the key is the public needs to be educated. And they are responding now. And once we can get to this point, moving into the new quadrennium, I think we'll have a product that we can address, and I really think the people will respond.
Well, we've got less than 15 seconds. Senator Marsh, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I'm going to jump back to your first question about the difference since 2010 in Republican control.
Yeah.
7 years, not a single year of proration in education. Through legislation we passed, economy now that is at 3.7% unemployment, a budget year in which we are actually have money to actually get everybody satisfied. I think we've had a good 7 years under that leadership.
Well, it certainly, the statistics say yes. So I want to thank you both for your leadership to the state and for coming on. You're always welcome here. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.